Hi, my name is Anna, and I'm with the Inflight Life, and I'm here to tell you about the story of the first time I became a flight attendant. Now, I've hinted around, and I probably told it a little bit in some other videos, but I'm just going to tell you. It's kind of funny looking back. It's kind of shocking because, this time around when I was, it's completely different. It's like night and day. So back in the 90s, when they did flight attendant jobs, they did a cattle call. Now, I wanted to be a flight attendant. I wanted to be a flight attendant since I was a sophomore in college. I actually wanted to stop going to school and go be a flight attendant. I mean, that's how much I wanted to do it. I didn't though. I finished my degree. I was a good girl. Finished my degree, got into a lot of school debt, got a real job as a teacher, but the travel industry was calling me. So the first thing I did was I went to a travel school. Don't do that. Now, the reason why I went to a travel school wasn't for flight attendant, it was actually to become a travel agent. Now, so that's a little bit, back then that was a little bit different. You had to go to some type of training unless you knew somebody it was very difficult to become a travel agent back then unless you knew somebody that would train you. But I didn't know anybody, so I spent money and went to travel school. Dun, dun, dun. So if you want to be a flight attendant, tip number one, do not pay for travel school. All right, don't do it. Okay, so I became a travel agent. Then my husband was in the military. We moved around. I moved to the DC area. I actually applied for a travel agent job, got the job, and then I also applied for a major airline to become customer service. Now, the reason why I didn't become a flight attendant right away is because when I was about 22, I went to Europe for to finish up some classes, and I got so sick on that trip. I discovered I had motion sickness. After 20 some years of not having it, I used to travel every year. I was sick. So I thought I would never be able to be a flight attendant. And so I became a travel agent, customer service. So going back to, I got a job as a travel agent. I had also applied to a major carrier's customer service. I got a phone call to interview with them, but I had already gotten the travel agent job, and something in my gut told me to turn the travel agent job down. So I did. I ended up interviewing with this major carrier, got the job, went to training, became a customer service counter agent. I loved it. I mean, yeah, it's kind of rough when there are cancellations. We were a smaller base. We were a smaller, because there were 3 airports in DC, and I was at Baltimore, BWI, and I was in this smaller section. So I actually got to, what was great about it is I was not stuck at the counter the whole time. I actually learned a lot of things. I learned, there was a 6-month period where I had to do baggage service. Now that was not my favorite, but that was my seniority. I ended up in baggage service. But you learn a lot when you move around different positions. I also worked on, during that time, I also became pregnant with my first child. I ended up moving me to gate because they didn't want me lifting bags anymore. So I learned how to be a gate agent. I learned the boarding and the pre-boarding, and I just learned it all. So it was a great experience, but I still wanted to be a flight attendant. So during the time when I first started, I actually went to one of those cattle calls, and I knew that I was internal, so I didn't have to go to it. I knew I would basically skip right to the interview. Back then, the cattle calls where you came in, and some airlines still do this. You come in and they evaluate you during that time. It was like a face-to-face interview right away. Back then, if you passed the cattle call section, then you were invited to a face-to-face interview wherever the headquarters was located. So I happened to go to one of those because I wanted to see. I talked to a flight attendant because I just wanted to make sure, is this the job I really want to do? Do I want to change being customer service and try to become a flight attendant? Well, I did. So what ended up happening is we moved back. We had to move to the Chicago area. The military sent my husband back to school. I had my daughter at that point, and I needed to change my job because I needed to make more money than I was making in customer service. So I had put in to become a flight attendant, and I automatically got an interview because I was an internal candidate. The day comes for my interview, and for some reason, I just assumed, when you think of transferring within a company, that you go one job to another, you think because you already work for the company, you don't really need to interview for it. I literally was not cognizant of the fact that I was interviewing. I went to the interview thinking, oh, this is just, I've just got to do this because, this is This is what they do. I have to just go through the steps before they can give me the job and transfer me. So there I was in my late 20s, and it's hysterical because I even think back, because I even remember the picture I had to take when I went to training. So I have curly dark hair, and it was short at the time. And curly hair becomes a like bowl, like a fro. So I had curly hair, I wore glasses, but they were wire rimmed, and I had braces. So I was like, I didn't really think too. I wore a pantsuit. I was not even concerned about my appearance. I seriously did not understand what was going on. So I get to the interview. I can't even barely remember. I was just hanging out. Oh, and the other thing, because I just had my daughter, I was nursing my daughter. I brought my breast pump. Yes, I brought my breast pump to an interview because I knew if I didn't pump, it was going to be a painful interview. So there I was, it was a mess. Literally, I can't even believe they hired, well, whatever. So anyway, I went through the interview, and I just remember, there was things I picked up on, things like, for example, they did a reach test, and they had you take your shoes off. And I remember when people took their shoes off, there were certain people that had holes in their sock or runs in their stocking, and I could see the interviewers the flight attendants looking at them like, ooh, they're not, because they were looking head to toe good. So I did all that. I got the job, and within like 2 weeks, I was at the training center. So I had training for, I think at that time, that company trained for about 7 weeks. I can't remember. I just remember it was a long, unpaid 7-week training. So, so when you think about, it's just so funny. So yeah, I got the job. I became a flight attendant. I flew for about 2 years, and then 9/11 happened, and I was furloughed. And then after that, because we were military, the military had just moved us back to DC, and my husband was getting, he was on a special unit that got deployed up and down the East Coast. I had to leave. I didn't have the support system to leave for 3 to 5 days. So I ended up opting out and leaving the company. Unfortunately, it was a very difficult transition for me to transition from being a flight attendant to a mom. I got over it. It took me a while, but that's what ended up happening. So all that is to say is when you're applying for a job, what they look for is your authentic self. The only thing I can think of is they weren't hiring me for my looks back then. They weren't. They looked at my record. They saw that I was a good worker. They saw that when they saw me, I was being myself. I was interacting with people. I was talking. I was enthusiastic. I clearly showed that I was the type of person they wanted as a flight attendant. So when you are in an interview or even in a video interview, be yourself. So, but that's my story of how I became a flight attendant the first time. I'll tell you a lot more. I mean, it's so funny. I don't remember. There's some things I do remember, but there's some things that I'm like, here's the other thing I think is hysterical is I had there was a flight where, one of the flight attendants, younger girl, I mean, I was young, I was in my 20s, but she was complaining about how it was such a difficult job. And I kept thinking, this job compared to being at the counter when there is a cancellation for the last flight of the day is way simpler than that job. So being a flight attendant to me was a much more relaxed and easy job. Again, I don't know how it is nowadays. We are 20 years later, and I'm going to see the difference, I'm sure. So, but it just all depends on your personality. Be yourself. Just be yourself. And that's what they're going to see, and that's what they're going to like. And that is why they will hire you, because they want to see the true you. Thanks for watching. I'm Anna, your in-flight life gal. Go ahead and share this if you found this valuable. Subscribe if you want to see some more. And follow me on social media.